We'll get started. Welcome, everyone. Yeah. Om. 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Mavid Vishavahaihi. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Puranamuninam Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusantatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamrutaduhe Namaha. Mukham karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande paramananda madhavam yam brahma varunendra rudra marutaha stunvanti divyaistavaihi vedai sangapadakramopanishadaihi gayanti yam samagaha Dhyanavastita datkatena manasa pashyanti yam yoginaha yasyantam na vidhu sura suraganaha devaya tasmai namaha devaya tasmai namaha sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarva papebhyah Mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. So we are almost finishing we're midway through the 8th chapter. And in this chapter, as we mentioned before, this comes right in the middle of the middle section of Bhagavad Gita, where there is a lot of upasana which is really mentioned. And this upasana is really necessary for us because it is about thinking of the Lord before we actually exit out of this body. But then, giving up a body might be easy, but giving up our thoughts are not that easy, right? Because we are determined by our own thoughts. And in our thoughts, always, right now, our thoughts are focused only on the world. But what Krishna is saying is, slowly and slowly, we have to substitute those thoughts of the world with the thoughts of Ishvara. And this is the only way that we can actually attain that Ishvara Prapti, even as I'm exiting out of the world. So this is the idea behind what the 8th chapter is coming into. And so for our reflection time, what I have here is, and we started this last time itself, where we talked about how remembrance of the Lord at the time of death is the key. And also to remember that as a person thinks, so he becomes, so because we have to make sure that as we are exiting, it is only our thoughts. So how can I maintain a series of thoughts which really will help me? So in our day-to-day activities itself, every single thought counts. So, as this famous passage says, watch your thought, that will become your words. Watch your words, that will become your actions. And watch your action, they become your habit. And watch your habit, it becomes character. And watch your character, it becomes your destiny, right? So this is so very important because we are really a bundle of thoughts, and it is the same thought that keeps recycled again and again and again. So in order for my mind to automatically and very easily slip into the thought of Ishvara, it is not that easy. How do I do that is the question. And that is where 8th chapter is trying to first tell us that, hey, there is going to be a time when your body is going to fall off. That time will come, no matter what. For everybody, that is going to happen. So at that moment in time, bringing something like that in front of us makes us immediately realize that I need to do something about this. I need to start remembering Ishvara now itself, so that when the time comes for me to exit out of the body, out of this body, I will have that thought. So that is the definite goal for all of us. It's almost like an action item. I need to put this into my to-do list, that no matter what, I keep Ishvara in front of me. And in this Navabhakti aspect in Bhagavatam, which talks, whatever I'm doing, whether I'm doing something whether I'm doing a garland for God, whether I'm doing prasad, whether I'm even working, anything and everything I do, I have to make sure that I'm doing it for that Ishvara. So that can happen only when I consider everyone in front of me as Ishvara. So it is like the ultimate teaching that Sri Krishna is giving, that I have to remember Ishvara all the time and perform my duties. So shloka number 10 basically talks about this Nishkama Bhava, on how I can approach my world. And then in, what am I doing? Sorry. So starting from 5, 6, we did that, and then 7. And then it is a kind of an abhyasa. This aspect of thinking always is abhyasa yuktena chetasa, na anya gamina, paramam purusham divyam yati parthan anuchintayan. So constantly he's saying, oh Partha, remember anuchintayan, meaning one thought following the other. Make sure that is always about that Ishvara. So who is that Ishvara at the highest level, at the level of Brahman? He's saying it has all these characteristics of Kaving, Puranam, Anushasitaram, Anoraniyam, Anusmaretya. And it is that Ishvara in the form of Nirguna, or Nirguna Brahman in the form of Ishvara, is Sarvasya Dhataram, Achintya Rupam, Aditya Varnam. And so with all this, he says, remember that, because at the time of death, Prayana Kale, Manasa Achalena. So at the time of death, it is possible to do this. And with complete focus, he gives some yoga practices here. So we move on to shloka number 11. Now, here he introduces this thing called Krama Mukti. What is Krama Mukti? Krama Mukti is where Krama means in sequence, which is that where when I go to, we'll be coming later to talk about the various yugas and all that. But here he says that, Yadaksharam Veda Vido Vadanti Vishanti Yatayo Vitaragha Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Pravakshe. So that state which the knowers of Vedas, and also by the Yatayaha, entered by the ascetics, as well as people who desire for the state, that goal, he will talk about it now. So he was basically, it's talking about people who are now convinced about who Ishvara is. And these are the three people: Vedavid, Yatayaha, and Brahmachari. All three of them, that is the knowers of Vedas, and those people who are convinced, Yatayaha, people who are convinced. They may not have studied, but they are convinced. And Brahmacharya is those people who know that they don't know yet, but they know there is something and they would like to move towards that. So these are the three kind of people. So Vedavid is people who know it and who live it. Yatayaha, people who may not know it, yet they live it. And Brahmachari, they don't know it, but they want it. So all these three candidates, they are looking for, they move towards it. So, and then shloka number 12, where, is the technique, which again we have seen in chapter 6, but here he says, Sarva Dwarani Sanyamya, having closed all the gates, indicating all those openings in our body through which we can get distracted. So, indicating all the sense organs, right? So, Sarva Dwarani Sanyamya, Manaha Hridi Nirudhyacha, having confined the mind to the heart. Then Mutni Adhaya Atmanaha Pranam, having fixed the life breath, they engage in the practice of concentration. So Asita Yoga Dharanam. So 4 steps mentioned here. First, controlling the sense organs, then confining the mind within the heart, indicating pulling the mind inward, not allowing the mind to go outward, and controlling the pranas and maintaining this position for an extended period of time. So he's talking about all these 4 steps. And again, the idea is that sometimes it's hard to fix our breath in one position in a matter of concentration. So we can actually make use of some kind of a alambanam or a murti or an idol or even any stone kind of thing. And so pratima alambanam, we said, is alambanam, which is in the form of a human. So pratima, so we have the number of gods. Each of the god is a representative of a human form. And pratika is any stone or anything, an object which reminds us of that idol. So we went through all this in the last few times. I'll just go on to then in shloka number 13. He says, so in that, so how do I remember? So he gives this one very simple mantra, which is Om. And so Om, he says, Om iti eka aksharam brahma, vyaharan mam anusmaran, yaprayati tyajan deham, sayati paramam gatim. So he says, Om, just by uttering this syllable Om, he who departs, thus when leaving this body, such a person attains a supreme goal. Sounds so simple, right? All I have to do is just keep on uttering the sound Om. But not that easy when it comes to us, because we know that our mind now has become so complicated. We love to think about many things. It's hard for us to focus on one thing. And even that one thing, when it is as simple as a, one syllable Om, right? So again, but then talking about simplifying our life and talking about how in this, as I'm moving to get to slowly and slowly, even if I'm saying, if I'm used to saying a lot of mantras and everything, that all is a help in my focus. But ultimately, the idea is to come to this one syllable Om. So Om is one way by which I can completely get my mind focused. So Anusmaran Yaprayati. So by this monosyllable Brahman Om, which represents Brahman, with that, a person moves forward, Anusmaran, because he, by keep on remembering all the time, he goes forward. And that person travels towards the highest goal of life. And this leads to Krama Mukti. Krama Mukti means that is going towards Brahma Loka. Okay. So now we are in this on earth. And the idea is that we'll be talking now, we are moving towards talking about what are the different worlds. And Brahma Loka is the highest of the higher worlds. And over there, once we reach the Brahma Loka, all people do is actually listen to the Vedanta, listen to Vedanta lectures. And at that moment in time, the thought arises on, by continuous Shravanam as to really what that high state is of consciousness and people. So this is what is Krama Mukti. So it is possible for us to attain liberation on earth itself when I'm convinced about this jnana yoga, right? So by understanding what consciousness is, what is the supreme reality. But the other way is, like he says, when I'm constantly thinking in my mind about Om, it's not that I realize Om at that moment in time, but I actually move on to the next higher level of Brahma Loka. So that is the what he's trying to give here. So in shloka number 14, he gives us a very, very simple method of reaching that that state of Ishvara. There is really no special need, there's no special technique or anything that is required. All the person has to do is to focus. So, Ananya Chetaha Satatam Yo Mam Smarati Nityashaha. So all I need to do is just focus on that Om, that Brahman, So Tasyaham Sulabhaha, very easily. Partha, referring to Arjuna, he says, Nitya Yuktasya Yoginaha. So such for him, I become easily obtainable, O Partha, to such a ever steadfast Bhakta. So I literally, I think I have to start keeping a journal from now on and seeing, how many times did I say Om today? Can I increase the number of Oms? Can I increase, So in all this, the ego still is there. So this is the thing to keep in mind, This is actually an upasana. So 8 chapters all about upasana, or the idea of meditating upon God, meditating upon that Ishvara. So here he says, Ananya Chetaha Satatam, not thinking of any other object, but constantly, Satatam, Yaha, he who, Mam, me, Smarati, think about me, always, daily. Tasya, for that person, Aham, that is Krishna saying, Krishna will very, very easily make sure that he reaches him. So this is a promise that he's giving, Krishna is giving. So here, we have those 4 kinds of muktis, right? Sayujyas, Salokya, Sarupya, then Samipya, right? 4 different kinds. One is, where you start to want to be near God. Another one is you're constantly thinking about God. Another one is where you attain that God, Sarupya, that is the highest form of mukti. So each one, what Krishna is saying is giving those different levels or different evolutions in each one of us. First, I start thinking about him, then I'm coming close to him, then, I take the form is the last one. Then, so this is the 4 things that is described here. So to summarize shlokas 8 to 14, we see that in 8 and 9, there is this discussion of the jnani who meditates upon Nirguna Brahman with the goal of attaining that supreme Brahman, that is Jivan Mukti. So Jivan Mukti is in this world, where I am today, when I'm focused completely, due to the high state of purity of my mind, I can attain that Supreme Brahman. Now, in shloka number 10, he describes about the yogi who, with a combination of yoga and devotion, with that, with the yoga balena, that shloka, he says it's possible to attain that mukti in this world itself. In 11, he gives the three forms, three different type of people: the Vedavid, who studies the Vedas; the Yateyaha, or the sannyasi, who through self-control, practice, and non-attachment; and then the brahmacharan, who controlling of the senses and who is constantly studying. They're all candidates for krama mukti. So krama mukti is in sequence, where you study and you still then you attain brahmaloka, and then in brahmaloka you hear about Vedanta. So all these, about 3 times, he says yogic concentration plus knowledge of Brahman and meditation on Om, Supreme Brahman via krama mukti is attained. And for that bhakta, pure, who is a Saguna bhakta, who focuses on the Lord's form, the Sarupya, that person also attains krama mukti. Okay. So then in 15th shloka, you see that Lord Krishna concludes his answer to the 7th question. If you remember, there were 7 questions that were asked, out of which 6 of them were focused on the different terminologies that Lord Krishna introduced to Arjuna at the end of 7th chapter. And the 7th question is Prayana Kale, he says, at the end of death, what happens? So that was what Arjuna's question was to Krishna. So in shlokas 15 through 22, now you will see how Krishna explains about how for all of us human beings, we basically have either one goal, which is really be in this world, khao piyo maja karo, be in this world, enjoy all this finite material things, or somebody who has understood the futility of all the finite material things and starts to think about that God who's infinite. So this is the 2 kind of goals that he says, is, and he points out. And then he also will point out why ultimately this, God should be our goal. God should be the right goal, or Ishvara is the goal that we want to do it, because in all this goals that we have today, all the finite material goals, there is a lot of defects in that. Okay. So that part of it, he will pretty much then say that that is why we should move over there. So in shloka 15, he will mention about how, what will happen if we continuously meditate upon Ishvara while performing our duties. So he says that such people, they do not attain rebirth after they die. They attain something higher. Okay, they may not come back into the same world with a physical form, whether it's a human form or whether it's a mosquito or anything, but they will reach a different type of world. What is that world? That is the part we are now coming to. So you will see in 8th chapter, these particular shlokas are the ones that really talk about the journey of the Sukshma Sharira, of the subtle body. What happens to that? What is that gati? Okay. So we'll chant the shloka. Mamupetya punarjanma, Mamupetya punarjanma, Dukkhalayam ashashvatam, Dukkhalayam ashashvatam, Napnuvanti mahatmanaha, Napnuvanti mahatmanaha, Samsiddhim paramam gataha, Samsiddhim paramam gataha. So here he's saying that having attained me, another birth in this place of pain, which is ephemeral, is not taken by the realized souls as they have reached the highest perfection. So in a sense, what he's saying is that once I'm convinced that Ishvara is my highest goal, okay, one will not come back into this world. One will completely realize that this world is a place of dukkha alayam. And we will spend some time really trying to understand why he's calling this samsar as a dukkha alayam. Alayam means abode, right? Just like we say Ramalayam or Krishnalayam, which is that place of Rama, permanent place of Rama or permanent place of Krishna. Just like that, he's calling that this state, what we are in, this samsar, is nothing but a dukkha alayam. Okay? And it is a shashvatam, which is very, very temporary. And na apnuvanti mahatmanaha. So somebody with all this knowledge, he who has gained that knowledge, that person who is a Mahatma will never ever want to come back to this kitchen, this mud pond, because they have already reached that state of perfection. So that is what he's trying to say. Having attained me, but they'll never ever attain this part of it. Paramam Gati. So this is where I wanted to explain about what is the dukkha. Okay. Dukkha. So we have to, we have to recognize what is my present condition today. So our present condition, so I have 6 different conditions which are mentioned here. Today, the world that I'm living in, okay, there is, and we'll go through each one of these definitions. It is associated with lot of pain, okay, and it is associated with lot of temporariness. So association with pain, AP. This is actually, this was through our Acharya in our 2-year course. He mentioned about the 6 ways, and I really liked it. So I thought I should, talk about this. So it is associated with pain, associated with temporariness, AT. It causes dependence, indicating that we are always dependent on something in this world. Okay. CD, it drains indriyas. Drains indriyas, indicating that constantly this sense organs, what we are supposed to be using it to keep this body fit, so that this body can be a vehicle to remember Ishvara. Okay. Instead, we are constantly making these senses go outwards and weakening it. And we'll talk about that too. And anything and everything I do in this world, the samsar dukkhalayam, there is no satisfaction. There is definitely dissatisfaction. And we'll talk about that too. And finally, relative importance. Okay. So that is the what he's trying. So most of us, we are living in this world thinking this is very, very normal for us. Okay. Just because my neighbor has bought a car, I feel I have to buy a car. Just because my neighbor is planting a lot of rose bushes, I think I have to do this. So constantly we are just following somebody else. Now, how do we develop some kind of a vairagyam or dispassion towards all this? And that is why he's trying to say, first, let's take association with pain, So he says that, for example, food, okay? I spent a lot of time, wanting to, I go to the Maya store, I pick up, suppose I have to make paneer masala or something, paneer tikka. I pick up all the cottage cheese, what I want. I spend a lot of time making all this paneer and everything. And then same thing with, having a nice garden, having a family, all in this, I keep on doing things, but the same things, the same paneer masala, for example, what I spent so much amount of time buying the material, perfecting the recipe and everything. After some time, when I take too much of paneer, it causes a lot of acidity. Paneer masala, obviously there's too much of masala, it will start causing acidity. So there is always some pain associated with something. Same thing with a house, okay? And I can tell you from my own personal experience of owning a house in Michigan, okay? Of course, it was very good when we bought it. It was only a 6-year-old house. By the time we left, maybe it was 91, we bought the house, we left in 2021. So 30, it's already become a 30-year-old, 25 to 30-year-old house. By that time, the same house, which gave me so much of pleasure, and Madhu will remember this, how much towards the end, we had to do, some repair or the other. And so there is always a pain associated with it. That's the point about saying that anything and everything I'm trying to acquire, whether it is food, whether it's house, whether it is, any other, even sometimes even relationships, even though our relationships, we have a great time, but it's the same relationship that can cause pain at another time. So how important it is on how much we are trying to associate ourselves with something. We have to, I know it sounds very depressing, right? But it is a fact of life. And that is why he's calling this as a dukkhalayam. Now, association with temporariness, which is anityam. Anityatvam, which is nitya means permanent, anitya means temporary. So anityatvam means something which is nothing is going to last forever. So the sukham that I get out of having a Pizza Hut pizza or one of the new pizza stores that is opened, I get into a habit. And once I get into a habit, at some point, that same pizza is going to give me a pain, right? So that is one thing. The next thing we call is causes dependent. So we are so, let's take this phone itself, if this phone suddenly loses battery, that's it. I'm like so agitated because I feel as if, what if something happens to me and I don't have anyone to call, right? So idea is to recognize that today I'm dependent on so many different things. So can I now start training my mind where I'm not dependent on it? So the same phone, which I'm so dependent, can I practice fasting, phone fasting, which is maybe 10 minutes in a day, I don't look at the phone at all. Something like that. So trying to practice that fasting, not just, of course, in food and some things, which is why, of course, we have all these vratas and everything, is because we can actually practice the fasting, and this we need to practice the fasting on those things which I'm very much dependent on. And then draining the indriyas, the same sense organs with which I'm facing the world, at some point it is going to start withering away. And I can see that from my own parents, when they could hear so well at one time, now it is so difficult for them to hear anything. So but then we become so dependent upon our indriyas that it's hard to know that there is going to be a time when my indriyas are going to fail me. So how can I be not dependent on them, and how I understand that can also be a cause of pain. Then dissatisfaction guaranteed. When I get this again phone, suppose I buy an iPhone 5 or something like that, it is for sure that after some time when somebody else has a better phone, I'm going to be dissatisfied with my thing. So almost anything and everything in this world, there is going to be dissatisfaction. Same thing with my job. Today, if I'm getting $100,000 per year or something, I want to get more than that. When am I going to hit the 200,000 mark? When am I going to hit a million mark? It's never ever going to stop, right? And finally, relative importance. Relative importance, somebody who's dear to me is not, we know that person is not going to be there all the time. At work, if I develop a friendship with somebody, somebody can be very dear to me today, but tomorrow they may not be. So everything is of relative importance. Same thing with weather. Weather was beautiful 2 months ago. Now I see that it's already fall time. The colors have changed red, or perhaps it's already changing even more. And even our own our body is changing. Everything is of relative importance. So ultimately, this is the reason why Krishna is saying that this world is nothing but a dukkhalayam. So that Ishvara represents that fullness, and it represents complete independence of all these six things. And I need to focus upon that Ishvara, because this world is finite. It is filled with all these six defects, and I need to be very clear about it and focus upon that Ishvara who represents it is independence. And that is why he's saying choosing God is the wise choice. So he says, Mam Upetyam. If a person attains me, then this Mahatma, for this Mahatma, Punar Janma na apnuvanti. These Mahatmas who have realized the six defects, they will never ever come back into this world. Whereas we are like this floating blob, we just have not yet convinced our minds that these defects are really, that samsara is indeed a dukkhalayam. Samsara indeed is this finite aspect. And we have to understand this, and only then we can move forward. Any questions or thoughts? Are we convinced about it? Are we not convinced? What do you think? So within the six defects, pretty much all of them are listed, isn't it? It is temporary. It does drain our Indias. We are dependent on it. So we have to reduce our dependence. Maybe for each one of us, the list may be different on what we are dependent upon, right? And consciously, I have to meditate upon this fact that these things will not really be with me all the time. So having said this, now we are moving into another section. Okay, this section is talking about this subtle body. We talked about how the subtle body, which is nothing but thoughts, right? Now, we have two choices. Actually, we have quite a few choices, but the two of the highest choice, he says, is one is in this life itself, through complete knowledge and through having this nishkama bhava, where I'm in complete control of my desires. I have totally understood the six defects. I have understood what my true nature is. I can just immediately realize that is one possibility. Now, if that doesn't work, then I constantly think about Ishvara all the time, so that at the time of my departure, I will actually exit out of here with that thought of Ishvara. Now, where am I going? Where am I going with that thought of Ishvara? My subtle body is still there. My subtle body is full of thoughts. Well, what do I do? So this is what the next, you will see shloka 16 to 22 gets us there. Now, some may say, am I not really going to heaven? Isn't that where you're going to take me to? But Krishna says, well, for in our Sanatana Dharma, that same heaven is actually here. It is on earth itself. We are the ones, we have the choice of making this earth as a place of heaven for us or not. So here we are talking about a different thing in Sanatana Dharma, and that is the various lokas, the various higher worlds, we may say. So that is what we're going to be talking about here. Actually, he talks about the Brahma Loka. So the soul, well, let me not say soul, the subtle body goes to the Brahma Loka. But to go to Brahma Loka, there are still some levels from where we are on this earth, which is Bhuloka, to the Brahma Loka. The Brahma Loka is also called as Satya Loka. That's the part that in this particular chapter, this shloka is hinting at. Okay. Brahma Bhuvana Lokaha. Brahma Bhuvana Lokaha. Punaravritti Norjuna. Punaravritti Norjuna. Mamupetya tu Kaunteya. Mamupetya tu Kaunteya. Punarjanmana Vidyate. Punarjanmana Vidyate. So he says the world, up to the world of Brahma Loka, are subject to rebirth. Okay, up to Brahma Loka. Once you reach Brahma Loka, you hear the Vedanta from Brahma himself, from Brahmaji, and you attain mukti. Okay, so but then up to that world, he says they are subject to rebirth. Punaha avartinaha. Okay, was subject to rebirth. But that person, Mam Upetya tu Kaunteya, but he who reaches me, Mam Upetya, one who reaches me, for that person, Punarjanma na Vidyate. Okay, so for that person, there is absolutely no birth at all. So this abode of Brahmaji is considered to be the highest. So Krishna says that all those beings who actually end up in this heavens, including this world of a Brahma, they do not stay there permanently. They have to return to earth at some point. Only those who attain Ishvara, they gain permanent liberation. So the first half, if you look at it, Brahma Bhuvanat Lokaha Punaha Avranita. So they are applicable for seekers who perform Karma Yoga constantly and they worship Ishvara also. So depending upon the sincerity of the deeds and worship, they will attain that particular world. Okay. A few of them may attain the abode of Brahma, which is this highest possible world. And here it is said that, the people who go to Brahmaloka, they enjoy only pleasure. There is absolutely no sorrow or no suffering at all. But once they attain the abode of Brahma, they do have a choice. They can continue to remain interested in pleasure or they attain liberation. So attainment of Ishvara is the same, or as basically it means is liberation. So this kind of liberation is called as Krama Mukti. So what are those 7 worlds which are above earth? And what are the 7 worlds which are below? So this is what here I've given here. So you have the Bhuhu, then on top of that Bhuvaha, Suvaha, Mahaha, Janaha, Tapaha, and finally Brahmaloka. Okay. And then below the earth, you have Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Rasatala, Talatala, Mahatala, and Patala. So these are the, so we can also go lower in our own devolution, you may say. So these are, so people who depart from the earth, they go to any of the planes, this one. So after spending due time in those places, either they enjoy the merits in all these or they suffer their demerits in lower planes and they return back to earth to continue their evolution. So this is the 14 worlds which are mentioned in our scriptures. So then what happens in Brahmaloka? So in Brahmaloka also, like I said, the thing is not permanent. Okay. you have the choice of either focusing completely on your studies, or you have a state of complete just pleasure. You have, absolutely no sorry, just an enjoyment. You can have the choice because you've attained so much amount of merit over there. Okay. So that is there. So shloka number 17, what we are coming up to this topic of cosmic creation. Okay, you will see where he talks about Sahasra and Yuga. He talks about the how does the Brahma Loka really look like? Okay, so we say that the cycle of creation began with Satya Yuga, or the age of truth. So that is followed by Treta Yuga and the Dwapara Yuga. And the last Yuga is Kali Yuga, which is where we are. So the Kali Yuga is supposed to be actually the shortest Yuga. I have actually a slide which I will show you, which, the Kali Yuga is about 432,000 years. Dwapara is twice that. And Treta is thrice that long. And Satya Yuga is 4 times that long. Okay. So now that you know the length of all these 4 yugas, 432 plus twice of that, which is Dwapara, plus 3 times of that is Treta Yuga and the Satya Yuga. So we can now calculate the length of actually Brahma's day and night. Sri Krishna says that one day of Lord Brahma equals 1,000 yugas. Okay. And 1 yuga is that 4 yugas, what I said. Okay. So and the interpretation here is that traditionally, so 1 Chatur Yuga, so 1 day of Brahma equals 1,000 times 4.32 million. Okay, or 4.32 billion years. So 1 day of Brahma is 4.32 billion man years. That's the length of this one. And this is also the length of 1 night of Brahma. Okay. I will show you the whole calculation is shown here. Okay. So the shloka is Sahasra Yuga Paryantam. Sahasra Yuga Paryantam. Aharyat Brahmano Viduhu. Aharyat Brahmano Viduhu. Ratrim Yuga Sahasrantam. Ratrim Yuga Sahasrantam. Teho Ratra Vido Janaha. Teho Ratra Vido Janaha. So he says, of the 1,000 yugas in duration, know that to be the length of Brahmaji's day, and 1,000 yugas long is his night. The realized ones know this to be the day and night. So this is something that has already been known in our Shastras. Okay. So this Brahmaji we're referring to as the Saguna Brahman. The Nirguna one is called Brahman, and so the Saguna is called as actually Brahma, or we all typically refer to this Brahma as Brahmaji in order to distinguish from the Brahman himself. So this is a graph that I was telling you about how the 1,000 yugas of 1 day of Brahma is split into 4 unequal portions. Satya Yuga is 400 into this is 4,800 years. Kali Yuga is 1,200 years or 2,000. So all this is the amount of time to Brahma's day, to Brahma's 1,000 is so much. So after each day of Brahma, which is close to almost 1 billion years, we complete 1 full cycle of the 4 yugas. So you can imagine as a human being, where we are, we still have so much to go through. And in order for a Brahmaji's day in this one, there's so many years, the whole thing. But all these are actually numbers. What is really the significance? That is more important for us, right? So the idea is this shloka is basically tell us that every action that we are doing in this birth, okay, it has some consequence. Some of the consequences you will see it immediately in your own lifetime, but some of its consequence you will never ever see it. Okay. And so what do I need to do for that? There is definitely a consequence, and that consequence will take us either above in any one of those lokas, or it may push us down to any of those lower worlds. So the only way I can, so this whole mukti that we talk about is really sometimes can be very difficult if I have to constantly think about depleting my balance of what I have done. Suppose I write, okay, this is the amount of bad things I've done, this is the amount of good things I've done. If I start taking a diary, noting it down, it's not going to work. So what is the solution? Right? The solution then is to start cultivating a detachment from the world. Okay? So we need to practice vairagyam. How do I practice this vairagyam? First of all, to recognize that anything and everything I'm doing in the world, I'm not doing it for immediate gain. Anything and everything I'm doing in this world, I'm doing it for the people, and I'm doing it with complete sincerity. Okay. And I have to constantly remember this, that because Krishna's, through this Dukkalayam, the previous thing where we learned about what Dukkalayam is, the samsara is Dukkalayam. So having understood that, why don't I start practicing doing something good? And when I do something good for the world, I do it in such a way that I'm not doing it for my own immediate gain. Because everything will end, if not now, but certainly in this 4.32 billion years, in this amount of time, which is what this whole yuga is all about, this Chatur Yuga, which is one day of Brahmaji. When Brahma goes to sleep, this world ends. So this is so I know that even if I end up in this 4.32 billion years time, at some point it's going to end. So why don't I end it right now itself for me here? Because otherwise I will be living through so many of these yugas and going through so much of pain, right? So that is what he's trying to say. So in shloka number 8, we will chant this, and then so he says, Avyaktavyakta Avyaktavyakta sarvaha Avyaktavyakta sarvaha Prabhavantyah ragame Ratrya game praliyante Tatreva vyakta sanyake. So he's saying, from the unmanifest, all the manifested proceed at the coming of the day, and at the coming of the night, they verily dissolve into that which is called as the unmanifested. So just like, so basically he's trying to say about what happens during Brahmaji's day and night. And Lord Krishna is trying to point out that it is very similar to how we are living our day and night. I mean, when I go to sleep in the night, right, the whole world is actually dissolved from me. I have no idea what has happened. And then when I get up in the morning, again, the whole world just unfolds. So what he's trying to say is, at the end of this pralaya happens when Brahmaji goes to sleep, or the entire universe is folded. Just like, and to give us an analogy, he gives us this day and night in our own world. Okay. So we'll continue with this shloka a little bit next week. We will focus a little more to understand what it means for us. Of course, the significance of the shloka we talked about, but we'll do that a little more and continue on to shloka 19, where Krishna says that, the living, whether we are living or non-living, we have a choice in this process of creation and dissolution. Sarve bhavantu sukinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyat dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Stop.